everybody. Welcome to City Girls Pod. And this is a show where we talk all things Sex in the City. And today we are talking about 2 episodes of the CARRIE Diaries. We're talking about season 2, episodes 10 and 11. So we only have one more episode recap of our podcast where we will cover 12 and 13. We're almost done. I'm Rich Wagner. Jax is here.
Hello. Yes, this is our penultimate episode.
Yes.
For our, am I saying that right?
Yeah, that's the right.
I only learned that word like a year ago, so I still feel tentative every time I say it.
Yeah, it's not for the show, but for our show, it's penultimate for CARRIE Diaries.
Yes.
And then we will just have fun covering whatever we want to cover until we get to And Just Like That sometime this summer.
They're keeping us waiting on bated breath.
So this episode is called Date Expectations. And it's a pretty interesting one. It's Walt and Bennett get some devastating news that forever changes their future. Sebastian gets an exciting work opportunity, causing him to bail on CARRIE on Valentine's Day, much to her chagrin. When Maggie accidentally enlists in the army, a surprising duo comes to her rescue. And elsewhere, Tom uses some reverse psychology to encourage Dorrit to start dating again. And it's interesting because this is another episode directed by Amy Heckerling of Clueless fame. And I felt it actually as I was watching. There was something, I can't even tell you exactly what it was. There was just something about it that I was like, oh, yep, there it is. And she did a number of these episodes, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, this episode, again, a lot going on, but some really fun hijinks with Tom, with Maggie and her new crew, Mouse and Donna. Yeah. And then, again, with the Walt storyline, some very difficult things that I thought they handled quite well.
Yeah. So you live in New York City. So do you agree that New York City Valentine's is intense?
Yes. I mean, my sister and I always joke around because we have a board game company and we've written all these blog posts and things like, oh, order a custom game for your significant other before Valentine's Day, because we see panicked men in like CVS and Dwayne Reed, like just clearing out the things like at 7:30 p.m. on Valentine's Day. It's very hard to get a reservation. It was funny though, because the One If I Land, Two If I See, where Sebastian made a reservation, it's like the most romantic restaurant in New York City. And I was just there with my friend Kaylee, who's been on our podcast. And we were like, oh, this is the most romantic restaurant in New York City. And here we are together.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, I guess they had to pick one that's been there a long time. I mean, we found out that I guess Serendipity's been there a long time. I didn't realize how long. But then you have like Tavern on the Green, some of these other, because New York can be so cyclical as far as things coming and going. So that would be tricky. But yeah, I guess I don't know. I'm a little bit surprised because you'd think that New Yorkers would be too cynical for Valentine's Day.
Yeah. I think there's a little bit of a thing of like, we have to do this. Like, it's this thing.
Yeah.
Okay, you got to go out to like the best restaurant, like do the thing. But it can feel overwhelming.
Yeah. I mean, I guess when you have something like the Heart and the Empire State Building and things like that, like, yeah. But so Sebastian is like butting it up with Tony Hawk. Getting all into skateboarding.
This was really funny to me. He's like, I swear he's going to be big. And I like this. I think it's nice to see Sebastian be really passionate about something. Yeah. I was actually a little bit frustrated with CARRIE that she didn't seem to get it, because CARRIE is very passionate about her career. And I actually think this is a really good thing that they both have something else to be passionate about.
Yeah. And maybe he didn't explain it kind of well enough that I know she just felt like that it was stupid, but she does injure herself and he doesn't really seem to care like that much, that like she's injured her coccyx and she's hurt. And so they're both just not communicating very well.
Yeah, I will say at that moment where he just kind of like brushed her off, I was like, come on, dude. Like
Yeah.
she literally fell.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I do think of skateboarding as more of a 90s thing than an 80s thing, because just the X Games and that kind of thing is like very 90s. And so it's kind of interesting to see it in this show, but I guess it's the very beginnings of the movement of the
Yeah,
trend.
he's ahead of the curve.
Yeah. So there's this big party, drag queen party, and it does feel a little bit like surprising to me that Samantha would never heard of Woody Allen. I mean, she's from New York. You never heard of him, like in
Yeah.
his heyday, making Annie Hall, and I mean, I don't know. That seems hard to believe to me.
Yeah, I feel like there are moments like this where I'm like, how did that Samantha become the Samantha that we know?
Yeah.
Because the only through line like can't be just that she likes to talk about sex and have sex. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
Samantha's pretty worldly and really smart.
Because she's a PR person, or she becomes a PR person. So she would certainly be aware of like the biggest filmmaker of that era, arguably,
Yeah.
at least. Certainly
For
New York, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So that didn't feel legit. But there's having this big party, and then we have Harlan giving like tons of roses to Larissa, which was, I thought that was kind of funny. And Carrie's got like her little rose. It was funny. If you were going to get flowers, what would you want? What's your?
Ooh, I love an orchid because it's
Oh
easy to
yeah.
take care of and they're beautiful.
Hmm.
But I really like any kind of flower. What's your favorite? Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I mean, I do like all flowers. I'm a big softie, but I like lilies. I think are my favorite.
Yeah, lilies are beautiful.
Yeah, I really, and they smell so good.
Oh my gosh, so good. Yeah, some flowers you like expect them to smell good and then they don't.
Well, roses don't really smell that much.
Oh.
No.
Mm-mm.
So then Maggie starts, Donna is at first flirting with the recruitment soldiers, which was really funny. And, and then Maggie starts talking to one of them and ends up signing up for the army, which I actually don't think would necessarily be that bad of a move for her. And
I don't
especially
think
if you
it's that
think
move
of,
at all.
yeah, especially in 1985, I mean, they wouldn't know this, but there was no combat for a long time. There was Desert Storm in like 91, 92, something like
Yeah.
that. But that didn't have that much ground combat. It was mostly aerial, assaults and things like that. But it would be actually really safe to be in the army in the 80s.
Yeah, and she needs money for school. And
Yeah.
honestly, she kind of needs a community and a sense of purpose. So I do
Yeah.
not think that this is ridiculous either. I actually thought this was going to be like, oh, that's my calling
Yeah,
kind of thing.
I thought so too. I really did.
Ho, ho, ho. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch-alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind-the-scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/hallmarkies.
And then she realizes she doesn't want to join the army, and so then Donna and Mouse help. join together to help remove her registration or whatever. And they do say at the end, they're like, all you have to do is call and say, I don't want to be.
It's kind of funny that it was that easy and like all these antics, but I love getting to see this unlikely trio hang out together.
Yeah. And they're all like flirting with the guard. And and they're like, well, we're really upset and all this stuff. And so then he lets them in, and he's gonna get big trouble for doing this. But he lets them into the like office, basically. And so then this guy Pete comes in, and he's like, what is going on? That was fun. And I like, what do you think of Pete? Did you like him?
I think he's sweet. I think he's actually a really good fit for Maggie. He's respectful. He's cute. Seems fun.
Yeah. And we get to see more of that in the next episode, but still, he was funny, especially considering the situation. And then I also really thought it was funny, this whole thing with Dorrit and Scott watching the violent movies. And like when they said violent movies, I was thinking that it was going to be like Rambo or something like that. But instead it was, it was like the killing fields. Like that to me is like a different kind of violence. You know what I'm saying? That like, I thought it was going to be like gratuitous violence. As opposed to like real world, like war and devastation violence.
Right. You're like, oh, this is an interesting thing for them to be doing.
I mean, it's not the first thing that I picture teens like grabbing.
No, but with Dorrit, you never know what you're gonna get.
I mean, like, I guess the comparison would be something like maybe like Jojo Rabbit or 1917 or something like that. And I just, I don't think teens are like jamming it out to 1917.
I definitely
or All Quiet on the Western Front or something like that.
That's their jam.
Yeah, I guess. And so the dad, he has this whole conspiracy kind of going on of that he's going to pretend to be against them, not be friends, and then that will push, because Dorrit's a contrarian, to push her towards, because he likes nerdy Scott.
Oh, Scott is such a delight when he has the interaction with Dorrit's dad. And he's just like explaining who he is. And he's like, don't tell Dorrit. And then she won't, well, we're not really dating, like this whole thing. And of course it works like a gosh darn charm. Dorrit wants to go out with him then.
Yeah. And I thought it was funny that he's eating the heart-shaped pizza. It was funny to me. It looked good. I wanted pizza.
Rachel, same. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm hungry now.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes. So then we have this whole party at this drag queen Valentine's party, and Walt isn't happy there. He doesn't like it. He's not vibing it. And Bennett has a hard time kind of understanding that, because he sees it as like, this is our celebration. But I can understand that, because just because you're gay doesn't mean you necessarily have to like this thing, like that are seen as like, you don't have to like clubbing. You don't have to like stereotypical gay things.
Yeah, I feel like this was really crushing to hear Walt say things like, I can't have a family and I can't be married and I can't have the picket fence, knowing that like he actually can. But I think he's associating.
Well, I mean, that's more in the next episode, but could he really in 1985 have?
Oh no, like, but I mean now, like if it was like looking into the future, you're like, no, you can have that someday. But like, you're right, he couldn't have that then. So he thinks that being gay means having this very particular lifestyle, and that everyone has, and by lifestyle, I mean partying, clubbing, like going out in this way and being in community in this way. And yeah, there's a lot of people who are gay that aren't like that. But yeah, you're right. Then there was no model for how a different lifestyle could look. So he couldn't even imagine. It was just hard to hear him say that. And because there wasn't like oh, I hope someday things will change. It was just like, this is what it means to be gay.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And I mean, I can understand Walt, because I know people that have left my church, right, and are gay, and some people that are still in the church and are gay, but that to go from like a really conservative upbringing to partying and just stuff that like just because you are embracing your sexuality, it doesn't mean that your personality has necessarily changed, and that the things that you didn't like or that you grew up, you might end up embracing those things, but you might not. And I know some people that have struggled with that they've struggled with something like pride, like getting really as invested in that as they want to, because they're just not, they're more like conservative as far as their tastes in entertainment and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think that Walt, he has a boyfriend now, and maybe he wanted Valentine's Day to be this sweet thing between the two of them. So I also understand that maybe he doesn't love this lifestyle of like going out and clubbing and big partying and all that. But maybe he also could do that sometimes if they could have like a special Valentine's Day for their first Valentine's Day together as a couple.
Yeah, that's true. It does seem like he's not being given much feeding of what he likes. He's only being asked to kind of compromise. And so then when they find out that Bennett's ex has AIDS, obviously everybody freaks out, including Walt. And I think that is understandable. I mean, especially in 1985, like that was a death sentence. It was terrifying. And so, yeah, I mean, I can understand why he had that reaction. Absolutely.
Yeah, everyone's reaction, like, and when Carrie came back to the apartment and she was crying, and I mean, all of it, like it was, I can't imagine what it was like to be a gay man during the AIDS crisis. And even like seeing, like before the pandemic, I saw The Inheritance on Broadway that talks about that, or even plays like The Normal Heart movies and things where you think about it and it's almost unfathomable, but everyone in that community knew so many people that died. It's awful.
Oh, like sometimes your entire peer group, like everyone that you knew. And if you watch the documentary How to Survive a Plague, they really do a great job of telling the whole story about the movement. And I really recommend that documentary. But yeah, I can understand that. And yeah, that was a great scene with Carrie. And since Carrie and Sebastian had been kind of not communicating well, the fact that when she needed him, he was there for her. It was great. And then they find out they're both negative. And I guess it is in this episode, the white picket fence. I was thinking it was the next episode, but anyway, that Walt and Bennett have this conversation. They're both negative, but Walt says that he wants the white picket fence, and he can't have that if he's gay. And there is some truth that it's interesting, the Whitney Houston documentary, because she was gay, but decided she literally says that, or the Robin, I think is the name of her partner, said that Whitney said that, she wanted to have a family. And at the time, that wasn't an option for somebody who was gay, or wasn't seen to be an option, at least. And so, yeah, and that was a thing. And so it is kind of perceptive in a way for Walt to see this and not just be acting on pure emotion, to be thinking about, okay, what do I want in my life?
Yeah.
But it's obviously really sad too.
Yeah. And I think that I have all the empathy for Walt, and he's also very young, and I think he handled it the best he could with the resources he has. but it was hard to watch Bennett have to talk about saying goodbye to someone he loved, and Walt like really couldn't be there even as a friend for him. He was like,
Yeah.
stop talking about it. And I get it. Like sometimes we're just at our emotional capacity, but it still felt awful.
Yeah, it was sad. It was very
Yeah.
sad. So then we also have Maggie. She's going to start dating Pete, the army guy, and that was fun. And then the dad is saying to Dorrit, saying, this guy's trouble. He's dangerous. He's a bad influence on you.
The look on Tom's face when he shuts the door after Dorrit waltzes off on their date with
He's
him
like,
is
yes.
perfection. Yeah, I did it. And he did.
And so then the very end is Walt calling his mom saying, I want to come home,
Yeah.
which is obviously very mixed feelings on that.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. So what would you give this episode 1 to 10?
I would probably also give this one an 8.5.
Mhm.
I do think it's really great, and I think that we're finishing strong. I hope they keep this up for the rest of the episode.
I know, I'm so nervous that it like
Nervous
I
too.
just we'll see next time if they knew that they were getting canceled or if they didn't.
Hey, this is David from the Piecing It Together podcast, a podcast about movies and the movies that inspire them. For over 4 years, each week, a guest and I take a look at a new movie through the lens of what other movies we think were either an influence or connect in some other way. It's a fun, unique way to discuss films that leads to a great list of other movies to check out that either explore the same themes and ideas or maybe utilize similar filmmaking techniques. Including special episodes in our side series that twist the format, we've done over 200 episodes, so there's bound to be one on a film you've been thinking about and want to dig deeper into. So check us out on all the major podcasting apps and at piecingpod.com.
Episode 11 is called Hungry Like a Wolf. And this one is it starts slacking at work. Carrie tries to cover for him. However, when Larissa finds out, things backfire big time for both of them. Samantha makes an uncharacteristic decision about her latest fling. Sebastian's father asks him for a favor that could change Sebastian's future forever. Meanwhile, Tom is hoodwinked by another lawyer, a beautiful lawyer, when negotiating a deal and is advised by the person he least expects. And the dad, he seems to be super into contrarian women.
Yep.
That seems to be the only relationships he's had on the show of people that he despises at first.
Yeah, I think that's first of all, very perceptive. You're right. And I wonder what things were like with Carrie's mom. You don't really have any indication of what Carrie's mom was like.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. But basically he goes in for this meeting or whatever, and he finds this woman who has contacts on, but can't find her glasses, which are on top of her head, and everything's all a mess. And she ends up getting his files because of this situation. And I don't really understand this because as far as I understand, I'm not a lawyer, but as far as I understand, like both parties have to provide discovery for any legal process. And you can't, that's how you end up getting appeals, is if like proper discovery wasn't done, or if like you can't just like surprise the court with things. You have to go through discovery so that both sides know. Even in this seems like an arbitration or some kind, but you have to give you have to give all the information to both sides. And so the fact that she would need to go through all of this to get the information doesn't really make sense to me, but like it was kind of a fun setup.
Totally agreed. I was like, how could she use something that she wasn't supposed to see? Like all of that, yes, but it's a fun setup so we can suspend our belief, I guess, or suspend our belief, whichever
Yes.
phrase. Yeah.
So it starts out with this hawk eating a pigeon in New York City. So basically they're saying New York City was pretty intense, and it's like more commercialized now than it would have been in 1985. I mean, they'd gotten some out of what it had, like in the 70s, it was like dark in New York, and then it was getting better, and then the 90s were like kind of peak New York City. And it got real cleaned up, and then obviously 9/11, so then everything kind of changed. But it's a little bit of a rough place there for Carrie. She's shocked.
Yeah, and I think it's also the juxtaposition of thinking she's going to see something exciting, and then it's what?
Yeah. And we also have Maggie. She's talking with Donna and Mouse, and they say that she confuses sex and love.
Yeah, and I mean, this whole storyline is so hilariously bungled on every front. I think that I definitely think if Maggie wants to not sleep with him right away, I think that's great. But you don't want to emotionally push this man away. It was just like so classically mishandled, which was fun.
Yeah, I mean, the attraction has to like be part of it, and you don't necessarily need to like give in to that right away, but like you shouldn't pretend like it's not there.
Right. And I mean, she was even, when he got off the bus and he's like, I have reservations for us at a romantic restaurant, and she takes him to the diner and eats chili cheese fries, and like Mouse shows up. It's like,
that was really funny with Mouse.
It was so funny. And it's like, I don't think he's just doing that to like seduce you. I think it's like he wants to have nice things for you guys and to connect. And it wasn't like he handed her lingerie and a hotel room key. It's like he was like, I made reservations at a nice place for us.
Yeah. If anything, she was the one. She was the one with the lingerie, but then again, she also is kind of insecure about the fact that she was the one that was her go-to, And so I do like this threesome: Mouse, Maggie, and Donna. A lot of fun.
They're so fun.
I wish they'd kind of come to that even sooner, because I really like the three of them.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I agree. It'd be nice if they would have come to it sooner, or if the show would have gone on. This would have been like a great established little group that they have now.
Yeah. So let's see what else we got. So Carrie is helping Bennett. He's not answering the phone. He's not there. She feels bad for him. So she does the article that Larissa signs. She writes the article, but then he comes back and he's saying like, oh, that was really hard for me to write and stuff. And she's like, what's with that? And he's like, well, you did that for me. And she's like, yeah, but you don't have to like expound upon it. I don't know. It's an interesting situation.
I get where Carrie was coming from. And also, like, I think Sebastian is a little hard on Carrie about this situation, in the sense that he's like, well, you shouldn't do something just wanting praise. Like, you're doing it out of the goodness of your heart. And it's like, well, yeah, but like Bennett really did kind of play it up.
Yeah. And she is right, as far as you do have to fight for everything when it comes to being a journalist or freelancer. Even like, that's the thing with this podcast, is that like there's never a time when it's just like coasting. There's always the next thing that you're like the next interview you're trying to get, the next idea, the next show that you're thinking of covering, things like that. And you think things get comfortable with like a sponsor, and you're like, oh, this is really good. And then something changes, they close down, like Hallmark Publishing last year.
Yeah.
I worked so hard to get a relationship with them, and I'm so disappointed. I mean, for the authors, but also just for me, because I worked so hard.
And you're like, it's not just like losing the sponsorship. It's like, they completely shut down. So you're like, there's nothing to even do about it.
So you're always just kind of picking up, okay, starting again. And then something will come in. Like, I hadn't really planned to make theater criticism a part of my income, but I was just doing it to help theater because I believe in it. But then I got then the Utah Theater Bloggers came in, and American Theater Critics Association, things like that. And so now it is becoming, and so just things are evolving, and that's the way it certainly is now. Maybe not as much in 1985, but I think pretty much for journalists or anybody in the gig economy, that's the way, like people say, do you have balance between your work and your life? Absolutely not. Like my work is my entire life.
Well, I think that a lot of people that ask that, their work isn't their passion,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And I think that I also like, especially when you're so passionate about things you do, it's less important to have a quote unquote work-life balance because you're truly enjoying,
Yeah.
I mean, you enjoy every part of it because there are parts of every job that aren't great,
Right.
but you're enjoying a lot of it.
Yeah. Like I'm going to Hairspray tonight. It's part of work. I'm writing a review that I'm getting paid for, but I'm going to Hairspray. Like, you know, so yeah, it's exactly. But if you do have to have a bit of a cutthroat kind of attitude about things, and just, you know, you have to be your own advocate. You have to pursue it. You can't just wait for people to give you things. So I understand what Carrie's feeling.
Yeah.
But it is, I mean, it's nice of her to do this for Bennett, but also, um, I think it can only go so long, you know, before he needs to take responsibility for what's going on. So, and they even say at the end, they're like, find out how Bennett got the job, you know, his job.
That made me
Yeah.
laugh.
So
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
then we have Samantha. She is trying to find this bird, and if she gets the bird, then she will get a reward. So she's putting out signs for a reward for the bird, but it's less than the actual reward. I don't know.
Smart.
And this guy comes up to her and they start flirting. They start a relationship. And then at this party, he introduces her to his wife and he says, oh, I'm in an open relationship and everything. But she like immediately bursts into tears, the wife. So it seems like they're not, like she says, just you haven't really got this open relationship thing figured out.
Yeah, like I totally believe that they're in an open relationship, but that it's difficult to navigate. I think the fact that he didn't tell Samantha, like that's just not, I think that if people want to be ethically non-monogamous, that's great, but you have to be open with your partner and you have to be with all of your partners. You can't, that's really not fair that he didn't tell Samantha that he was married.
Well, especially in the 80s when you've got things like AIDS going around, like you have to be so careful.
Yeah.
Or you could die. People like we're dying, lots of people. And so that would make it even more so. But we've always talked about the fact that Samantha was not a hippie. She wasn't just like free love. She was actually kind of picky about, you know, that she couldn't have a guy that was too tall or too in a particular jobs or was too short or like had all of these these too old, these qualifications. She wasn't just like, you know,
anybody, no.
sharing it with anybody. Yeah. So it did actually kind of make sense that she would, I mean, and you'd want somebody who was going to be honest with you to be with. So that
I like his energy actually, aside from that.
What's that?
It is a bummer because I like his energy and he has sort of like a quiet confidence that I really like. And the way he looks at her, like he really likes her. And it is a bummer.
Yeah. And yeah, they did have like a little bit of chemistry They were cute, but I can understand why she did. I absolutely loved two of the fashion looks in this episode. She's in a black dress, black and white striped dress that had these different triangles to it. I just love that dress. It was so good. I guess it's by a designer, RVN it's called. I thought it was such a cute dress.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it looked adorable.
Yeah. And then her dress at the party, I absolutely loved. It's off the shoulder. It kind of looks like one of those, psychiatrist ink splat things.
Yes.
And it looked like that, but colored. Different, like water, almost like water droplets of different colors. I loved it. I thought she looked great in it. I thought it was really interesting. It had all these different layers. And I don't know, it's hard to make print work in formal wear. And I don't know how Carrie would have gotten this dress. I guess maybe an interview or something, but I absolutely loved it. I thought it was Carolina Herrera is the designer. And I thought it was such a great look.
I love the fashion in Carrie Diaries so much more than And Just Like That.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really good.
Oh yeah. I mean, remember in Just Like That, they kept putting Cynthia Nixon in like the frumpiest clothes ever. She's a beautiful woman. Why is she wearing like?
It felt so bizarre, Rachel.
She was wearing like 2X, like the most floppy, like bag woman looks.
Yes. It felt like they were trying to do this weird stereotype signaling that, oh, hey, she's a lesbian now.
Right.
Oh, cringe. Yeah. It was like, guys, you're missing the plot entirely.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah.
It really is. But every once in a while, Carrie had a few good looks in and Just Like That, but it was rough. It was rough. But yeah, we've said this many times, but they've done a very good job in the Carrie Diaries of filtering 1980s through 2013, 2014. Because everything would be bigger, everything would be more kind of garish and in the 80s. But it has all of those touches, has all of those feels, with still being something for 2013, 2014. And they did a great job. The only thing I don't love about her fashion in these 4 episodes that we've just recently watched is whenever they're putting her hair up, I think it's so weird looking. Like particularly at the interview scenes, like they have it kind of like plopped on top of her head in this like weird way, and I just don't really like that.
Also, it's an interesting choice because she has like this gorgeous hair that we're used to seeing down. It feels iconic Carrie Bradshaw like that.
Yeah. Like if you're gonna have it be like half, like make it an actual like bun or make it an actual ponytail.
Yeah.
Don't make it just be like we went crazy with bobby pins and like
right.
So I don't love that look. But yeah, so then Carrie takes the interview from Bennett and talks to this dancer, which probably if Larissa had known that she was so young, I would think that Carrie would be the ideal candidate to interview this dancer. But she doesn't seem to have a notepad when she does these interviews or a tape recorder. So I'm not sure how she is even doing these interviews and remembering anything, because I have to have it recorded.
I think it's great to have it recorded too, to reflect back on the cadence and the way people express things. This is really tricky because Bennett was not going to show up for that interview. It's not like it came across his desk and Carrie took it from him. Like Bennett did not show up.
Yeah. But he's mad at her because he gets fired. And that's when they say that in the city, you either kill or be killed.
Yeah, I think it was pretty nuts that he got fired, but I guess he really hasn't been. Larissa also knew he didn't write the first piece.
Yeah. And she said that, And then Pete says to Maggie, says that I love you even though we haven't been together, and that he's fine with waiting, which is so romantic and sweet.
Romantic, so sweet. I think so on brand for this character, and I love this for her.
Yeah, it's refreshing. It's refreshing for her. And so then Sebastian's dad comes and asks for his trust fund because he blew everything on this investment. And meanwhile, Sebastian is waiting for this investment that he's made into Tony Hawk and skateboarding and everything. And so basically Sebastian's attitude is, well, you made the money as far as the trust fund. I'm going to give it to you. So he does, but he's kind of waiting to see. I mean, I guess his dad is still paying for the apartment, but it's rent controlled. So I guess it's okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he decides to give his dad the money. And then Samantha finds the bird and brings it back and doesn't take a reward.
Oh, I got emotional. That's
sweet.
She's having a change of heart. She's opening up her heart. It's very sweet. Sebastian's dad is still the same mess of a man that he's always been. Like, eye roll. It's like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
If you had been a kind person before this and you were like, hey, I'm desperate, I would have had a little bit more empathy, but also it just seems like he uses his son, and I hate that.
Well, and also I would be nervous about giving the money, even though I understand Sebastian saying, well, he made the money, because you don't feel like he's going to be a good steward of the money.
Exactly.
So I don't know, you want to keep it where it could be used the most effectively. But yeah, that's what he does. And then Carrie ends up getting Bennett's job. So is she going to be going? And she got into NYU too.
Yes,
It's very exciting. Yeah.
Very proud of you, Carrie Bradshaw.
Yeah. And so she's going to be working while also going to school. So that's going to be a lot.
That might be tricky for her to
Yeah, that'll be a lot. Because they weren't as encouraging of different kinds of educational paths then as they are now. Now, a lot of people work and go to school so they don't get into debt. That's what I did. I got my master's when I worked the whole time so that I didn't have debt. And so, yeah, that helps a lot.
Did you find it difficult to do though?
It was, I mean, the MBA program that I did was kind of designed to work with your job and work with your career. So that helped make it easier. And it was just a hard time in my life, period. At that time in my life, I hated my job. I was miserable. I finally quit with 6 months left in my program. So I ended up, that's when I started working. I became self-employed and I've never gone back. I did basically accounting clerk for that was from 2008 to 2013. And then 2013 is when I moved into marketing and digital social media management and things like that. And I've been doing that ever since. But I was just so unhappy that it was even worth it, because that was very scary to me, the idea of quitting my job when I hadn't even finished school. But there just becomes a point where you have to fight for your happiness. Like, it's not worth it being so miserable as I was. And so that was it. Very, like, I don't look at my graduate studies with that fond of eyes, just because I think it was a good program and I enjoyed doing it, but it was just such a hard time in my life. So it all got kind of meshed together. Yeah. But it is crazy that I haven't been to school since 2008. It's just like, I don't know. This is crazy. That's been 15 years. It doesn't feel that long.
For another round of something, you're like, PhD?
I've thought about it. I honestly have thought about it, but I don't know. I just feel like, what would it really give me? And I'm happy doing what I'm doing.
Right.
I don't feel like a need for a career change. So yeah, just keep supporting the podcast, please. All of you listening, please, join the Patreon so I can keep living my dreams. But there's something I think about school, not this total tangent, but like, there's something really nice about school in the sense that you really finish things. Yes. That you start out, you don't know all these things. You look at the syllabus, you've got all the stuff that you're learning, and then you end up, you finish, you've learned it. And in regular adult life, you don't finish things that way very often. I mean,
always feel linear. Like
yeah, like you finish doing the laundry, you got new laundry. It's kind of redoing the same task over and over again.
Yeah.
And I think being self-employed, at least I have some variety,
Right.
but because one day I might be reviewing a show, one day I might be reviewing a movie, I might have an interview, I might be doing this with you. Like there's some variety, but I know adult life is a lot about redoing the same things over and over again. And I do kind of miss that sense of accomplishment that you have in school, whether it's an individual assignment or project or paper, that you get that immediate feedback from. I appreciate that. I miss that a little bit, but yeah, 15 years, wild.
And it marks that rite of passage of like, okay, you move on to the next year of school.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a different, and I think my brain still works like that a little bit too. I think a lot of our brains still mark the end of the year a little bit sometimes with what the school year was.
Did you do your graduate degree at the same place that you did your undergrad?
No, I did it. I was in Pennsylvania for my undergrad and Texas for my grad, but I did it right after. So it felt, it was just such an extension of being in school, like, oh, more school. And I think that a lot of people who took a break in between, a lot of people in my class that took a big break in between, they felt like they got a lot out of it because they were a bit older, maybe appreciated it a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't take a huge break because I finished in 2002 undergrad. Then I went on my mission, came home 2005. I started my grad program 2005. And so I didn't really, maybe like 6 months or something like that.
But not enough to feel
Not
like,
enough.
yeah.
Yeah. But it's, I don't know, it's an interesting time of life.
Yeah.
It's an exciting time where everything is changing. But I think your late 20s is almost like one of the hardest times of life because you're still paying your dues in whatever career that you're doing. And so sort of the big dreams that you were sold in college aren't really coming to fruition. And no matter what you're doing, like if you're a mom, if you're a stay-at-home mom, like that's when your kids are really little. And, so you're paying your dues, like your late 20s are hard. They're hard.
Yeah. And anyone who thinks that that's supposed to be like the easy time, they're wrong.
No. I don't think so. But anyway, so what would you give this episode 1 to 10?
I think I'd also give this one an 8.5. I thought it was really solid. Again, lots of different stories going. I'm curious to see how they wrap us out of
this.
What did you think?
I agree. I mean, and especially I just loved those 2 looks. That really elevated the episode for me.
Yeah.
I was so excited. So yeah, 8.59, something like that. It was really good. But let us know what you think of these episodes. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section or on Twitter. You can follow us at City Girls Pod. And Jax, where can people find you?
At Jacqueline C Tweets on Twitter and Jacqueline Collier on Instagram.
And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. Check that out. Also, make sure that you're following the podcast, Hallmarkies Pod, and Hallmarkies Podcast, all of our social media. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. That helps us a lot. And if you are watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that so much. We also have the Patreon group and merch store where you can get City Girls Pod merch. So please take a look at that. It's the best way that you can help us. And so we appreciate it so much. And we'll talk to y'all later. Bye.